centuries, Alderaan stood as a beacon of hope in the Republic. But the Empire came.
I have chosen to test this station's destructive power on your home planet of Alderaan.
Peace while you suffer. The Emperor drowns you in black waters.
He wants me to be Darth Revan again. Serve him as I did centuries ago. He made me a Sith Lord and named me Darth Revan.
The Force does not control you. You saved Ugandan using something you thought was important. But your motives are still aligned with the Jedi Code.
To arms, men! Defend the throne!
Anakin Skywalker was weak. I destroyed him.
He was weak and foolish like his father. So I destroyed him.
Master Windu, you have fought gallantly. Worthy of recognition in the archives of the Jedi. It is finished.
To them it is.
I have been waiting for you. Is it true that he is the chosen one?
Hey guys, and welcome back to State of the Galaxy episode 4. You probably noticed that there are 2 episodes. If I planned this correctly, there'll be 2 episodes coming out today. One of which being State of the Galaxy episode 4, this episode, and our spoiler cast for Star Wars episode 8. This one will be steering completely clear of Star Wars episode 8 spoilers. So don't have to worry. Where there's no spoiler announcement, and you can watch through, no fear of us saying anything. Jar Jar Binks is Kylo Ren, anything like that. Right, okay. So what we've just done is we've just watched Attack of the Clones. How long has it been since you last watched it?
Oof, blimey. When did I last watch this? Must have been probably a good couple of years ago.
Okay, so some of it, because I remember you saying when we were watching it that there were some scenes that you hadn't remembered, like when you saw the Death Star plans in the Geonosian conference room and things like that. But we're not going to go through the entire film because it was some of it was painful enough for us to watch. But there are some pointers that I'd like for us to revisit. And the main subject to this episode I should probably have started with is episode 2 as bad as what people think it is? Because more often than not, and I found this rather difficult to believe, it's actually episode 2 that is the most hated Star Wars film out of the original 6, not episode 1. But so the first thing that I'd like to say that I personally like about episode 2 is that all of the extra lore stuff that they throw in. I don't know whether you remember, because I think you were out preparing lunch at this point, but when Padme gets back to the Jedi after her ship's been bombed and they're discussing who it could have been, I think they say the Senate believes that it was disgruntled spice miners on the moons of Naboo. Now, it wasn't until after they introduced that premise that it turns out that spice mining is actually a drug. And spice is a highly valuable substance that's handed around the criminal factions throughout the Star Wars universe and things like that. So I don't know whether one of her one of the things that she stood for in I suppose like Star Wars Parliament was anti-drugs. So that would be why there was some kind of retaliation there. But that's a little snippet of something that you wouldn't have got had you not looked into it further. And of course there's a really weird jump of emotion between Anakin and ObiWan at the very beginning of the film, because they're quite chatty, they're quite they throw banter back and forth between each other in the lift, and as soon as Anakin expresses any kind of outside of Jedi quote unquote proper way to act in front of someone they're trying to protect, he goes on the defensive and starts saying, we will not exceed our mandate, we will do as the council has instructed, and it becomes a very kind of hostile environment. Even Jar Jar's looking kind of awkward, and we're feeling awkward enough to see Jar Jar back in the scene at all. But I wasn't sure what you thought about that, the kind of jump between them.
No, I do get where you're coming from with it. It's a bit odd, and I guess you see bits throughout the first 3 films where everyone's perhaps a bit harsher on Anakin. and other bits that he's more friendly and banterful with him.
It is very.
Just another example, wasn't it?
I always thought of it as kind of like a father and son dynamic, where he would be always the teacher when Anakin's doing something wrong, and very much criticizing the things that he does. But then when Anakin's on those rare occasions when Anakin isn't actually doing anything wrong, he's chummy and light-hearted with him. I don't know whether you found the same kind of thing throughout the 3 films.
Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying. When Obi-Wan's being less of a mentor and more just their companions, it's quite a friendly atmosphere. But there are times that Obi-Wan's more harsh, perhaps.
Indeed. And something that I was inspired by when I was watching an old podcast from one of my favourite podcasters. Do you think that Obi-Wan knew about Anakin's feelings for Padme in Episode 2?
I think he did about halfway through the film.
Because he does yell out to Anakin when she falls off of the Republic gunship. He says, "Anakin, don't let your personal feelings get in the way."
Yeah.
But I wasn't sure whether he only believed it to be a very strong friendship.
No, I think he knows.
And if so, then why didn't he go to the council about it? Is it because Anakin is the chosen one and they've been giving him kind of special treatment just because the prophecy states that he'll be the one who brings overall balance?
Well, in Episode 3, Obi-Wan turns around and says, you were like a brother to me. So could it be more to do with that? Just how close they are?
Yeah, so he didn't want to rat him out to the council. Yeah, perhaps, yeah, that's a good point, actually. So it wasn't so much trying to keep Anakin on his good side to help fulfill the prophecy. It was just kind of like a brotherly respect for each other. So he would... I mean, even Obi-Wan had a connection to Satine in the expanded universe, so we could also argue that he was respecting Anakin's personal life, and he would hope that Anakin would do the same if he ever found out about his. So there's that as well. So that's a good point. But another part that I really like about Episode 2 is that we get to see more of different planets. With the original trilogy, we're very much kind of squashed into just where the battles are taking place and where the overall story is. We don't get to see a lot of it. And with Coruscant, we have the speeder chase at the beginning of the film. And we get to see the kind of like the underbelly of Coruscant and the nightclubs and various shots of the higher up, more expensive area of Coruscant as well. And then right towards the end of the film, we get to see the factories and the area of Coruscant that's a bit decimated. I'll get to that at the end of the podcast, actually, because there's some speculation on that. But I don't know whether you enjoyed that you got to see a bit more. Even with Naboo, you got to see various parts of it. With I don't know whether it was her own personal house that they were staying in for a little bit, but there was a palace area where they're eating dinner, and he does the weird, I'm going to take your food and then cut it up for you like you're 2 years old, and I'm going to feed you with the Force or whatever. So yeah, we get to see a lot more of the different planets and Camino as well. Although there's not much to see apart from the rigs and the giant ocean. You still get to explore a bit more of it. It's not so much secluded to 3 or 4 sets. Something that CGI kind of allows us to do.
Yeah, no, like what you were saying with Naboo and the house, perhaps it's some kind of summer house that
the
family has for use for their own free time use.
Because I can't really understand how she pronounced it. She either says late country or lake country.
I think lake country.
Oh, okay. So that could be perhaps an area, like you say, that's a summer house for her, a family owned estate that she goes to stay on. I mean, it is her home planet, so
makes sense.
It makes sense. Yeah, no. So that's something that I really enjoy about Star Wars Episode 2. But something that we pointed out pretty much, well, you certainly did, in the beginning of the film, was the pointless air acrobatics and moments that just weren't needed, primarily of which being the speeder chase between Anakin and Obi-Wan and the shapeshifter, where she leans out the window and shoots an electrical beam that zaps across, supposedly blocking their path.
But it's about 10 foot high, and you could have either gone beneath or
above,
high over it as you wanted to.
The sky's the limit, so they say. But So there were moments where there were acrobatics that didn't need it, and also, you know, when they were weaving in between the pillars of fire.
Yeah.
If you watch that, and again, this is me taking it frame by frame, but every single time they veer out to the left and the flames go past them, they're actually going through the flames. They're not overshooting it. They're going through the flames, and they're not exactly going that fast.
I guess they might be going fast enough that
the flames don't
doing anything. It's like if you put your hand through a Bunsen burner,
it doesn't hurt.
You don't hold it there, you're fine. But it still seemed kind of pointless to be doing it. You could have just either gone left or right. Hey.
Yeah. So we covered the pointless air acrobatics, and the next thing I want to move on to that wasn't so great was the horrible kid directing. We had two scenes that stuck out primarily for me, which was the scene in the Jedi Temple with the Jedi younglings and Master Yoda. And Master, because someone erased it from the archive memory. And then we had Boba Fett and Django.
Yeah.
I can't. Oh, what was it? His evil laugh?
Yeah, that got to me when they were the ship going through the asteroid field, and we'll have a few surprises for them. Okay.
I'd love to know how they directed that laughing. It's like here's all the cliche witch films that we've ever had. Now do something like that. We really want to show that you're a sinister character. I feel like the Boba Fett dynamic would have played off better had they had him be unsure about what his father was doing, rather than just blindly following him, because he wasn't a clone. Well, he wasn't. He was a clone, but he wasn't altered like the others.
He was able to think.
He was able to think. So he wouldn't have followed his father necessarily with blind obedience. He would have had some moments of doubt.
But I guess if he was a direct clone, then he would want exactly the same things that his father wanted.
But then we're getting into the very kind of scientific side of cloning. Like, there was someone, I think it was a science teacher, who said to me, even with things like Dolly the sheep, you have to have them in exactly the same environment and experience exactly the same things, because it is our experiences and our environment that helps to mould the people that we are. So Jango Fett's prejudice towards the Jedi and all of his motives are very much moulded by the experiences that he had and the experiences that Boba Fett wouldn't have had.
I mean, like you say, it's the environment in which you grow up that develops you. I suppose they were both in the same area for a starter, and if all that Jango was feeding to Boba was hatred for the Jedi.
Yeah, I suppose because Boba was secluded within the Camino facility for most of his young life. If he was just bombarding him with all of this prejudice towards the Jedi, whilst Jango Fett could go outside and explore the universe as much as he wanted, Boba Fett was stuck there. So I suppose that's the fight against my point, that that would have fed his prejudice. So maybe that's why he was constantly on his father's side. Good point. Yeah. Next, and something that's a personal problem with me is when Anakin and Padme go to the house on Tatooine, owned by I think it's Klieg-Lars or Krieg-Lars, I can't remember how to pronounce it, and then you've got Owen and Beru there as well. They miss out a perfect opportunity to have blue milk, because she's actually blending up like red berries, and then they have like red berry milk or something. You do see blue milk later on when Padme is consolidating Anakin and on the loss of his mother. But I still thought that would have been a nice opportunity to have it. I think a lot of fans would have been like, yeah. I suppose they got that reaction later on when you saw it with Anakin.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. The old classic.
The old classic. And that's why I like seeing it so much in Rogue One. I don't know whether you remember. Right at the very beginning, when Krennic's arriving to take away Galen, you see him whip around a table and there's a jug of blue milk. Rewatch that scene. It's really fun just seeing, because the camera really focuses on it. It's just fun seeing that. Next, again, going back to the pretty locations, we do see quite a lot of them. Naboo, even Geonosis for the most part. Some of those shots are quite nice.
Seems quite pretty. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of all the other planets. So we've got Naboo, Geonosis, Camino, Coruscant. I think that's it. 4 planets.
Yeah.
I want to say there's 4 planets. Oh, Tatooine as well, I suppose. Yeah, so 5 planets. But you do so get some nice locations. There's some nice locations within those, like the Senate buildings, again on Naboo. I love the cliche sci-fi look of Kamino, where it's all white walls and little black strips, kind of like you see in certain Star Trek shots and things like that. And then again in earlier Star Wars, aboard the Tantive 5, which is the ship that Leia's aboard. It's kind of reminiscent of the corridors that they have in that. Similar kind of layout. But something that I've always carried with me with Star Wars, and I think it was something I brought up with Harrison when we did the spoiler cast, not too sure, but was the most important line in Star Wars for me. I don't know, do you have a favourite scene?
Certainly from film 2, I really like the scene where they've been captured on name of the planet's escaping me.
Geonosis.
Thank you. And they're in the arena with the Geonesians and fighting off monsters. That's pretty cool.
I can't remember all the names.
The whole series, or
overall series if you want. But yeah, that's still a cool one because you got Akale. I can't remember the name of the other two creatures, but the praying mantis. The name of the species is Akale. Can't remember the name of the other two. But yeah, if you want to go overall series,
blimey,
that's a lot of films to sift through.
I've just backed myself into a corner there, haven't I?
Yeah. Don't worry if you want. It's something you want to come back to because it's always something we could revisit. Seeing as this is an episode 2 podcast,
we'll come back.
But for me, and it's not just my favourite scene in episode 2, it's my favourite scene in all of Star Wars is actually in episode 2. And it's the scene where Padme, when Anakin's kind of like got to that point where I've raged out, I've talked about killing the Tusken Raiders, and I'm now at that point where I just want to cry. Padme says to be angry is to be human. And that really speaks to me, and it's also something that I feel like I really hope that George Lucas was trying to make this point throughout the entire series, where it's like you've got this faction which are known as the Jedi, and they're all good and they're all peacekeepers and they have no material possessions, they're kind of like monks, and then you've got this other side which are built of passion and hate, and they always use dark abilities, and they're very kind of brooding and that kind of thing. The point that I'm hoping that George was trying to make was that these two factions are impossible. You can't live your life just as one or the other. You have to. We are all humans, so we have a bit of both in us. And to be angry is to be human. That's one of many emotions that make us up. So that's why it spoke to me. I really like that scene.
Get where you're coming from.
So another point that was brought up in that same series of Star Wars podcasts, they talk about Anakin's childish reaction to helping Obi-Wan on Geonosis, because when he gets the vision of his mother being in pain from the Tusken Raiders, he doesn't know what's causing the pain, but he sees that she's in trouble and says, I know I'm disobeying my mandate to protect you, Senator, but I have to go, I have to save her. It's the opposite with Obi-Wan, because he gets the transmission and he knows that things are bad, but he's just like, meh, the council's told me to stay here. It's almost like he's completely he's completely just writing Obi-Wan off. It's like, because he's already gone through these stages of Obi-Wan's not treating me right. It's like, man, if he's not going to treat me right, let him die.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it?
And of course, then and then you can also make the argument on top of that it's Padme that steers him round to changing his mind, and because he's interested in Padme, he will do what she wants him to do.
Yeah, it's interesting one, that. I mean, certainly you see an element of, I say hatred, but disapproval, but then maybe he is just following orders because he's disobeyed so much before. He
doesn't want to go above and beyond, because he realises that he's the chosen one, but he's not walking around like Harry Potter is in number 4. He's like, yeah, I'm the chosen one, I can date all the girls that I want and I can be a bit of a prat. He's still walking on very thin ice because the council did let him in despite the fact that he was too old, and there's this great expectation around him. He probably doesn't want to let them down. So yeah, there is also that point. It's a good shout. And there was a point that you made, and I've actually highlighted it, Tom's point, was that Jar Jar was very much backed into a corner and almost manipulated by Palpatine. I don't know if you remember the scene.
Yeah.
It's when they're talking about the creation of a clone army, and he says, what senator would propose such a I can't remember the way he worded it,
would support such
a radical amendment or something along those lines. And he was like, if only Senator Amidala was here. And it was almost like he was like, come on, Jar Jar, kick in whenever you like, because you have the power. You have the power to give me this emergency power in order to...
And he's sort of trying to talk Jar Jar around to the idea that Senator Amidala would do this, but actually she wouldn't. She's not here, so we're screwed. We're in trouble. But yeah, I saw that, because you saw the last shot of that was of Jar Jar kind of looking down and like pondering what the next best step might be to take. But of course, you also made, and it was quite right, the point that Jar Jar is quite simple. So if he, in a moment, despite the fact that he may have all this other evidence to back it up or to oppose it, if something's suggested to him, he will latch on to that, and that will be the truth, the law to him. So when someone suggests, the clone army will be the thing that will bring peace to the galaxy, minus the fact that hundreds of innocent lives will be lost, and it probably won't be the best idea. He'll be like, oh yeah, let me fly out on my giant grey frisbee in the Senate, and we'll set this law down, and he'll get the power that he needs in order to do this. And of course, and I don't feel like I'd ever do a good enough tribute to him. That's why I've never ever done one. But Christopher Lee in Star Wars is definitely a good point to Attack of the Clones, if nothing else. Yeah, no. It was great to see him in it, and he was a lot of fun during the fight between him, Anakin, and ObiWan. And it was just nice to see him talk matters out. Even though it's more politics and it's more war stuff, it made it a bit more interesting to have him there. Maybe it's just because it's the actor. I mean, it's kind of like with Jessica Jones, if you don't mind me embracing different media for a little bit. Tennant's in that. Right. And the only reason why I really watched that primarily was because he was in it. He's in it, yeah.
So it's it might be the same kind of thing, but who knows. There is a scene after Obi-Wan's captured on Geonosis, he's imprisoned, and he has that kind of one-on-one talk with Count Dooku. Yeah. And he talks obviously about his time training Qui-Gon and how he'd witnessed the corruption, but also he said, you must join me, Obi-Wan, and together we'll destroy the Sith. Do you believe that his offer to Obi-Wan was genuine?
I mean, obviously going back to sort of the way Sith work, the apprentice is always trying to gain the strength to overthrow the
master. Yes,
master. So perhaps that's Count Dooku's play on that, and he's trying to gather the strength. He thinks that perhaps with Obi-Wan
he'll be able to, because he won't be powerful enough otherwise to do it.
To take out Sidious.
Another point that I've always thought about was that unlike Anakin and unlike Sidious and unlike Darth Maul, he never displayed the common yellow Sith eyes. There was only once, and that was during the Clone Wars film that they brought out, the animated one. And that was it. So maybe he's not full dark. Right. Maybe he never was. Because as far as
he was just power hungry.
He was just power hungry, and he's part of a rich family, hence his status as a count, and he's a very tactically minded human being. But outside of that, I don't believe that he was full on cynical and narcissistic Sith. He was, if he was truly a Sith, then he was a different kind of faction where it was a more calm-minded and reasonable, and yet still utilise the dark side rather than this just one focused. There must be dominance and power and fear.
Yeah, that's certainly a interesting thought. Yeah,
because he did have a lot of Jedi training behind him, so he'd I still don't know why he defected. That's something that I need to look into, but he probably still has elements of the Jedi in him. And maybe, like you say, it's not only a part of him wanting to gain strength in order to destroy Sidious, but maybe he's actually looking to destroy Sidious because he's kind of regretful for what he's done.
Maybe, yeah.
he openly says to Master Windu that he's sorry that they've got to that point, because if he didn't give the order for the Jedi to be slaughtered, then he probably would have been mowed down on the spot. He had numerous people behind him that would have killed him. He probably wouldn't have got off Geonosis alive.
No, I mean, I think it's quite a complex.
It is. Perhaps it's something that we need to look.
Emotions, that isn't it?
It's something that we need to look into. Perhaps as a standalone podcast is Dooku.
Yeah.
And what his motivations were throughout his time on screen as well as off screen, because he's a complex character. It's definitely more so than how we see him in just the 2 films that he's in.
Yeah.
Last couple of points. C-3PO slapstick, which I know that you enjoyed, especially on the Battle of Geonosis. I know that I was waiting for the puns to start falling, like when C-3PO.
This is such a drag.
This is such a drag, and I'm quite beside myself. I know lots of people hate it, but I don't find it too bad, because Star Wars always has an element of slapstick. Jar Jar, unfortunately, was episode 1, and you had C-3PO for episode 2. R2-D2 was episode 3, and then you had a bit of everyone with episode 4 and 5, and then episode 6 was the Ewoks.
Yeah. I mean, I do quite like C-3PO being a bit sarky and a bit as he is. I mean,
you see where kind of like the love-hate relationship starts to build between him and R2, because obviously there's not really much in episode 1. All it is just him remarking about how C-3PO is practically naked because he's just in his wiring. It's like, my parts are showing. And there's no real back and forth between them, but in this there really is, because there's quite a lot of time where they just spent together.
Yeah.
So it's quite nice to see that kind of blossom, and then you really get to see, because in episode 4 there's more of a hate than there is a love relationship. It's not until R2 actually starts to get hurt on the Death Star run that you actually start to see some compassion from 3PO, because apart from that it's just him kicking him and just go that way, you'll be malfunctioning in a day, you narcissistic scrap pile, and things like that.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, isn't it, when they leave from the escape pod,
and and they go their separate ways.
Yeah,
but they ultimately both regret having done that. The complicated love banter. You've got the horrible stuff, which is that I don't like sand and I like everything soft and smooth, but then you've got the complicated stuff where Anakin says that now that you're with me, I'm in agony. The closer I get to you, the worse it gets. The thought of not being with you, I can't breathe. I'm haunted by the kiss you should never have given me. My heart is beating, hoping that the kiss won't become the scar. And then my bit, you are in my very soul, tormenting me. I don't know if you go up to someone and start saying that if you are hoping to get with them. And again,
it's a bit odd, isn't it?
What Padme says to Anakin on Geonosis, I've been dying a little bit inside each day since you came back into my life. I don't really see that as being love-felt banter.
It's just, there's not really banter, is it? It's proper, like, I'm so in love with you that you're torturing me.
Yeah.
Like, Jesus. Stop it.
That's it's something that's again, this other 2 podcasters speculated on, that perhaps these were all warning signs why these 2 people shouldn't have been together. And we'll probably get into that in another podcast. And of course, Dooku's saber was because with episode 1 we had the shock and the brilliance of the saber staff, but unfortunately that was ruined by the first trailer. Apparently you saw it in the first trailer. I think one of the first cuts of the trailer was just Darth Maul activating one side, but then if they'd left it, you would have seen it when the film actually was shown, and that would have been amazing. But then they showed it, and it's like that kind of ruined the surprise. But then you have Dooku's curved hilt, which was amazing.
That's good.
It just fits Christopher Lee as a person. It was wonderful to see. Dooku and Anakin's light show when he slices the light cable, and then you get to see the red and blue shine, and it's more Dooku that's in red, and then you get Anakin's occasional blue and red, which I suppose is more symbolism towards his conflict with the light and dark. And could something that I don't know whether you noticed, but Christopher Lee, whenever there was a shot of him fighting Yoda or fighting Obi-Wan and Anakin, it's a cross between a stunt double and a CGI model.
Is it?
It is, yeah. That's not him. And it's the same in episode 3. It's even more distracting in episode 3. And my thought was, could it be just as dramatic, if not more so, if it was more like the fighting that they had in episode 4, well, obviously Vader was limited by the clunkiness of the costume, and Obi-Wan was limited by the fact that he was quite aged at that point, and it's Alec Guinness. I don't know. Do you think perhaps if it was just because that was something that they changed with the prequels? They changed it from longsword fighting to this kind of swishy, lightless blade work. Yeah, something that's always conflicted with the two sets of films. I personally think that it could have worked with the correct music and choreography and camera work. It could have looked quite nice.
I mean, I think I always prefer the sort of faster paced stuff. But
well, I suppose that's something that you've experienced with your martial arts training.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean,
you probably wouldn't be in a very good fight if you were just doing the kind of unless you're wielding something that's like, I can't remember which anime game it is, but it's the one with the ridiculously long sword.
God, yeah.
That's the only time that would probably be applicable if you were wielding a battle axe or something like that. Or if you were me and wielding a battle axe, then perhaps that kind of pace would be forgiven. And the last point is the dark half of Coruscant, the fallen Coruscant that's in the expanded universe. Of course, the expanded universe is something that was discontinued, and I don't know whether you know about it, but I'll quickly sum it up. During the Old Republic era, the Sith Empire, the original Sith Empire, attacked Coruscant, and there was I can't remember what the sacking of Coruscant. They bombed the Jedi Temple, and they actually bombed the surrounding buildings. They sent thousands of Sith warriors into the Jedi Temple and killed everyone, and then just ransacked Coruscant. So when you see Count Dooku's solar sailor land in that building, you see bits of building behind that are charred and missing windows, and either halfway through construction or have actually been attacked. So that's something that I've kind of recently started to look into, because you've got the factories as well, which is I suppose the life.
I just sort of took it as it being more of the sort of industrial area of
fair point.
Yeah, no. I guess that makes sense, doesn't it?
Because even though the Old Republic was several hundred, or if not thousands of years before Episode 1, there would have been a lot of rebuilding to do with the amount of destruction that Coruscant received. And all it was only one part of Coruscant. They could have just upped or moved the Jedi Temple and to put it somewhere else. That doesn't have to be the same location, or even if it is, that location that we see isn't too far away from the main area of Coruscant. Maybe. But anyway, we'll wrap up this episode of the podcast. Yes. Thank you very much for joining me, Tom. Hopefully see you again on the next episode, and we'll be back to our normal layout after next week, because next week next week will be my hopefully thoughts on seeing episode 8.
Nice.
And we may do a couple of spoiler casts, but they will be labelled out, and then after a month of the film having been out, we'll start talking about episode 8 freely. And this is our warning to you guys. After a month, those who really want to go and see the film, we hope will have seen the film by then. And hopefully then we can talk about it freely. But thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you guys next time.
See ya.